So the way that we have learned, I think, over time to build the business case for sustainability is really at three different levels that we talk about. The first is protecting and managing our reputation and our brand image. And so all of the work that we do helps to protect the company's reputation. That's the basics. In fact, this is how the whole field of corporate sustainability, as we call it today, really started about 20 years ago. It was about managing what stakeholders thought of you and how they viewed you. But that really is table stakes these days. The next level is, what can you do around sustainability and better human rights practices that actually helps productivity, that can save you money, that can improve productivity? And so as we look at that, for example, the water less program we have to use less water in our manufacturing process actually saves about 5 cents on every unit. That may not seem like a lot, but if you add it up across millions of units, it becomes real money. The worker well-being programs that we have that improve workers' health, that improve workers' financial standards, this makes them happier workers, more engaged workers, more productive. It reduces turnover and absenteeism in our contract manufacturers, and they see that. And so the business case that we've been able to document is a 4-to-1 return. For every dollar that's invested in these kinds of worker well-being programs, the payback to the supplier is $4. So that's the productivity part of the business case. The last part of the business case, and the one that sometimes we still struggle with trying to achieve, is growth. How does sustainability contribute to growth, either revenue growth or innovation? We see it very clearly in innovation. As we set out to reduce the kinds of chemicals that we use to make our product, we actually discovered a different process for finishing our jeans. What we discovered is that lasers could get the same look as some chemicals could. And this new process that uses lasers is called FLX, Future-Led Innovation, and it is replacing now some of those chemicals that we used to use that required workers to wear heavy protective equipment and masks and gloves, and us to install all kinds of engineering solutions at the vendor level. We don't have to do those anymore because we've eliminated the use of this particular chemical. That's on the innovation side. Now, on the growth side, it's harder. That's where we're really trying to take all of the good work that we do around sustainability, embed it in our products, and tell that story to the consumer. It's harder right now because today we know there's just a very small percentage of consumers that are willing to pay more for a more sustainably made apparel product. It may be different for food, it may be different for consumer products, cosmetics, but for apparel, it's still a very small percentage of consumers who are willing to pay more. So we're still trying to figure out how we add to the growth equation in terms of the business case for sustainability.
Despite all the bad news in the world today, the good news is more and more people are now demanding companies to be responsible to the community. Cause marketing is a big thing now in the private sector. Consumers now are picking brands that actually invest in the community, that seem and have more responsibility to communities. And that's a good thing. And while Trump has stepped back from the Paris Climate Agreement, we have seen our private companies step up. We have seen our subnationals step up. We have seen private companies now saying, what more can we do? And that's really hopeful. One of the companies that I'm most just kind of in awe of and inspired by is our partner Ecos. It's led by a CEO of color, a woman of color named Kelly Vlahakis. And she has been able to lead Ecos, a cleaning supply company, to be zero waste, carbon neutral, and water neutral. The first ever a cleaning manufacturing company itself, right? But first ever a company can do that. And not only that, when we were able to go see her facility, her employees love her. They get paid good wages. They're deeply committed to the issue, and this is a global company. I lift them up because, on the one hand, it's important for our private sectors to step up. And then the second point is, great, we're beginning to see that push. In fact, a lot of the people attribute the Paris Climate Agreements to the commitment of our private sector in order for it to have happened in the first place. But now we really need to have private companies step way up the way that ECOs have, because we all know that 1.5 degrees is still not enough, and we just need to have some bold leaders, some bold CEOs step up and lead the industry and lead the work.
Yeah, lots of companies have now figured out, and at TNC we're always encouraging them to figure this out, that doing the right thing for the environment is usually the right thing for their business too. Sometimes you might have to be creative in how you think about that. You might need to take a medium or longer term perspective than otherwise. But it's hard for me to think of many businesses where doing the right thing for nature doesn't benefit your business. There are many, many examples to point to. One that comes to mind right away is Walmart. Walmart is a controversial company. I'm sure they would prefer to be viewed as less controversial, but they're in everybody's spotlight. And so 20 years ago, 15 years ago I think would be about the right time frame, they decided to take a hard look at whether they could be a better environmental citizen and do that in order to improve their reputation, but do that in a way that would also improve business results. And the more they looked at the opportunity, the more they found. The first sets of things they did was they just, for example, really focused on energy efficiency in their stores and in their distribution system. And of course, they quickly discovered the more efficient they became, the savings fell to their bottom line, but their environmental footprint improved too. Then Walmart is a bold company, and they've got some bargaining power as such a dominant retailer. For many of the biggest consumer goods in the company, Walmart is by far their biggest customer. So Walmart's got some clout. So Walmart has now been in the practice of convening the CEOs of their big suppliers. It's a who's who of some of the biggest companies of the world. They also invite the CEOs of some of their friendly NGOs. I'm one of them, so I show up. And Walmart has gotten very good at graciously but forcefully requiring all of their suppliers to up their environmental game. The most current example of this is something Walmart's doing called Project Gigaton, whereby Walmart aspires to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in their supply chain by 1 gigaton. That's a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. I'm sure they'll pull it off. And then in turn, all of those companies who are participating in this, they've all discovered in their own way that this is in their best interest too. As they get more sophisticated in managing their supply chain, what happens? They find cost savings. They find operational improvements, better community relations. What else happens? As they seek to recruit young people into their companies, young people want to work for companies whose values match their own, so it helps on that front. More and more investors care about companies' environmental performance, so they're favored for those kinds of reasons. So it becomes a very virtuous cycle, and lots of good things happen from these kinds of corporate initiatives. But it's a little bit tricky and complex because we're always finding the harder we look at this, there's even more we would like companies to do. So as commendable as it is that Walmart and their suppliers, together with NGOs like us and others, are working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1 gigaton in the Walmart supply chain, that's positive. We are also saying to all those companies, we need you to be more forceful and assertive with us here on Capitol Hill when we push for the government policy we need. So I think it's a requirement for NGOs, for customers of big companies, for investors to keep pushing the envelope. How can we ask companies to do more? And I expect what we'll find as we do that, companies will do more and they'll find that it redounds to their bottom line best interests too. So this ought to be a win-win, but we need to be pushy to make it happen as best we can.